You're all probably familiar with the protective benefits of citrate. However, did you know that magnesium can also play a protective role against kidney stones? The problem is that most people don't get enough magnesium in their diet or get it from a source that just doesn't work for the human body. So if you've been battling pesky calcium oxalate kidney stones, stick around for this video. Hi, I'm Joey Weichman, and welcome to Stone Relief. The quest to prevent kidney stones is fundamental for anyone that's ever suffered from one. Unfortunately, most people give up at the very start of this quest because the information available is incredibly muddy and their doctors are likely leading them off in another direction. And make no mistake, this is all intentional and part of a larger plan to keep you sick and dependent upon that system. So even though preventing that next kidney stone is hot on your mind, most people don't make it all the way through to find out what will actually work for them. I know this because I was one of these people for a very long time, and it wasn't until several years into my struggle with kidney stones that I said enough was enough and began to piece together what worked and what didn't work to prevent my calcium oxalate kidney stones. So today, we're going to dig into a mineral that most of us here in the West need to improve upon and that can play a significant role in kidney stone prevention. That mineral is magnesium, and today we'll reveal a brief background on this mineral, how it works to prevent kidney stones, and then the best sources to help you in your kidney stone prevention journey. So to begin, let's jump into some background. So, magnesium is an essential nutrient, and what I mean by essential is that it must come from our diet. And this is going to play a critical role when we start talking about the sources of magnesium later in this video. But just know that this is not something that we're just going to make ourselves. There are certain things like amino acids that we can do that with, but with magnesium, it's got to come from our diet and it's got to come from a bioavailable source that we can absorb. Now, the other piece of this puzzle, most of the US population and pretty much the Western world to begin with, they're deficient in a number of different things, but magnesium is definitely one of them. Now, the RDA, or the recommended daily allowance for this particular mineral, is 400 milligrams minimum for men and 350 milligrams for females. Now, there's some variation just due to body size here, but in general, if you're sticking around that 350 to 400 milligram mark, you're generally going to be in a pretty safe area. But again, most people in the West, now we don't even come close. Now, the biggest problem here is that this deficiency in magnesium, the more and more that I've learned about diet and just with my own battle with kidney stones over the last couple decades, is I'm coming to find out that it's really diet is the central role in all these things that we're talking about. And this will really resonate true when we talk about sources of magnesium in the last chapter. But you know, this deficiency in magnesium, amongst other key components that help prevent kidney stones, I think is a really key piece to this overall resurgence, or just, you know, really the growth that we're seeing in the kidney stone population. You know, I first started, this was just, you know, about 10 years ago, the percentage of the population that had kidney stones was down around like 7 to 9%, but now it's upwards of 20% of the population worldwide, which is absolutely wild in just a short span of a decade. And again, I think that what we're eating is a big part of this, and the lack of the appropriate foods in our diets is what's causing a lot of our kidney stones. Now, beyond just kidney stones, low magnesium can lead to a lot of other things. So irregular heartbeats, this dysrhythmia that is very, very prevalent amongst most of the Western population. Inflammation, a whole host of diseases and disorders come out of inflammatory type of conditions. Increased stress. So magnesium plays a role with our hormonal system, along with a number of other of these electrolytes that are very essential to our body's function. So increased stress load can be a big problem with this as well. That's why you see a lot of magnesium products on the market, you know, advertising on like de-stressing or being calm, because they know most of the population is deficient in this, and then it also will increase stress levels or cortisone within your body, or cortisol rather. So increased stress is a big problem. And then kidney damage, not just damage due to kidney stones, but just the actual functioning of your kidney itself, which we'll talk about here in a second, can be affected, which can be very problematic. Now, we've talked about a lot of negative stuff here, but one of the positives that we're going to expand upon further in the next chapter is how magnesium can also bind with oxalate, and this can actually play a preventative type of role when it comes to calcium oxalate kidney stones, which are the most common type of kidney stone. It's also the type of kidney stone that I suffered with. So stick around for part 2, where we'll talk about exactly how magnesium plays a protective role with calcium oxalate kidney stones. All right, so now that we know that magnesium can play a protective role against calcium oxalate kidney stones, which again, the most common type of kidney stone out there, roughly about 80% of cases. So even if you don't know what type of kidney stone you have, doctor didn't tell you, you didn't see it on the paperwork, who knows? Chances are it's probably a calcium oxalate stone. So this is important information. Now, magnesium can bind with oxalate in a number of different places in the body, but there are two real primary things. And I just want to back the bus up here a second because I know some of you may be watching this and you really don't know what oxalate is. So oxalate is a chemical compound that is found in predominantly plants. Actually, all plants have varying degrees of oxalate, and it is a defense chemical. So plants, instead of evolving the ability to either like run away like animals or fight like animals can, they're rooted in the ground and they can't really go anywhere. So their only defense against things eating them undesirably is to poison them. And oxalate is a poison. Now, the dosage matters greatly. There's actually some grasses out there that are super high in oxalate that will actually kill animals as large as cattle. So it is absolutely wild. And then there's some stuff that's completely benign and it wouldn't even impact you whatsoever. But oxalate, just know, is a plant defense chemical, and it is the signifying thing that forms calcium oxalate stones, because calcium is a native mineral to our body and our ecosystem, or our operating system, if you will, whereas oxalate is not. It is a foreign invader, it is a poison, it is a toxin, and can cause a whole host of other problems just outside of kidney stones. Now, where does this bind? This chemical, this alien chemical, if you will, that enters our body through the foods we eat, where does it actually bind with magnesium? Well, it can happen in a couple places I had mentioned. So the digestive tract, this is a big one as well. So the issue with the digestive tract, very much like with citrate, if you've watched any of our previous videos, we'll probably pop a card up here about our citrate video. So oxalate is not digested at the same speed as everything else. So a lot of things will get broken down by our digestive system. That's this role of our whole digestive tract. And then they kind of get parceled and shuttled out to different parts of the body. Calcium may go to the bones, and we'll have sodium and other electrolytes that end up in our bloodstream. But oxalate, our body doesn't really know what to do with it. And so it just kind of gets hung up, if you will. And it can take several days for our body to actually process this. So if you're not being consistent with magnesium consumption or eating a diet that supports the prevention of kidney stones, well, your timing is going to be all goofy and it doesn't line up one-to-one. So it doesn't mean that you can eat X amount of milligrams of magnesium to X amount of milligrams of oxalate and boom, they're just all going to disappear. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. But there are a trace amount that can end up in your waste, number two, if you will, your feces in the digestive tract process. So it'll take a little bit off. The rest of it, though, really gets kind of potential to bind in the kidneys, in our urine, basically. So it will end up there, our bodies process it and they filter it, and it ends up in our urine. Now, this is really kind of why I've mentioned this in this next point here. So kidneys filter about 2,400 milligrams of Mg, which is magnesium, on a daily basis. And most of that is returned into our bloodstream. Only a small amount of it ends up in our urine because it's so critical to other processes in our body. So 95 to 99% goes back in our bloodstream, and then if we are chronically deficient in magnesium, like most of us here in the West are, well, not even that much makes it into our urine, like at all. So getting the proper amount of magnesium on a day-to-day basis is essentially critical, and you also must do it consistently, which again, we'll talk about in the next chapter, where diet can solve a lot of that. But the problem is with low magnesium, you're going to have increased magnesium retention in your body because your body's smart. It goes, well, I don't have enough of this coming in through my diet, so what I do have, man, I better hold on to because I don't know when the next time I'm going to get some more of it is. So instead of it, a partial amount ending up back in our blood or in our urine itself for us to be able to use protectively for like binding with oxalate, well, the body just hangs on and it doesn't ever really touch our kidneys. It just gets flown around in our bloodstream to support other areas that are super critical to our body. So when that happens, this is a problem because there's going to be less available magnesium in our urine to be able to play a protective role against calcium and oxalate binding together. Because instead of, if there's not enough citrate or not enough magnesium in your urine to bind with that free oxalate, well, guess what? It's going to bind with calcium and it's going to form calcium oxalate kidney stones. And again, this is going back to this first chapter here, the problems with the way that we're eating here in the West especially is leading again to a lot of our issues with the rise in kidney stones. So this is all interconnected here. They're not operating independently. Now, positive side of things is that when you do get sufficient magnesium, magnesium can also bind with citrate. And when this ends up in your urine, these molecules do tend to separate, just it's a chemical reaction type of thing, and you have even higher levels of protection from both magnesium and also from citrate. And as we're going to talk about in this next chapter here, so hang tight, we'll talk about what the best sources of magnesium are that will also lend itself very kindly to citrate. Stick around.
Just a reminder, this information is available in written form on our website. Find the link below in the description.
All right, so now that we know that magnesium plays a protective role just like citrate does, where the heck can you find it? Well, let's walk through some of the different possible sources that you may encounter. Let's talk about some of the not so good and some of the best sources as well. So the first place I'm going to start off with, which is where typically most people go, and I know this because that was where the first place that I went when I was figuring all this stuff out, and I also have a supplement company. But supplements in particular, they're not great. And the reason behind that is this. So most supplements are either synthetically manufactured, they derive it from some other source through a whole host of very complicated mechanisms that make it patentable for them to be able to sell later as some sort of a derivative of magnesium. And you'll probably see this because it's magnesium something else on the label. And synthetics are just not very well absorbed because it's usually just a piece of the pie. So if you imagine a mineral or a vitamin as like a whole circle disc or a whole pie here, when they synthesize things, they take out the most potent piece of that puzzle and they eliminate all the other things. So it's just like a really narrow sliver slice that will provide the most magnesium that they're looking for. But what they fail to realize is that the rest of that pie and that mineral in its natural state provides benefit as well. It's the entourage effect. If you're familiar with like people talking about all the different cannabinoids within like marijuana or hemp or things along those lines, all acting together to be able to provide the net benefit that you're looking for. This is same as true with any kind of vitamin or mineral or amino acid. The whole part matters, and that's why when we synthesize things, it doesn't really work very well. Our body just doesn't recognize it, and as such, it's poorly absorbed. So when you take a supplement that's not recognized by our body, well, most of it ends up in either your waste, which is either your feces or your urine. And some of that ends up in your urine may end up actually playing a protective role, but for the most part, that just kind of gets shuttled down into your feces and out of your body. You're not going to see it in your kidneys. The other piece of this puzzle is there's upset stomach and diarrhea risk as well with some of these because your body doesn't recognize it, doesn't play nice, and if you take too much, well, you're going to have some stomach upset. This is why these products that you find on Amazon or on the marketplace have very big warning blocks that say, if you take too much, you're going to get diarrhea or get an upset stomach. And this plays true again. I've tried many of them. And then lastly, there's actually some possibility for these to be contraindicated with pharmaceutical drugs. Now, these are kind of like diuretics, anti-cancer, there's some heart medications, and also some antibiotics that are also in this mix. But magnesium supplementation doesn't play well with those and actually can cause a really potentially dangerous reaction. So if you choose to go this route, pay attention, but I think there's better routes to go. Now, the next most popular one, especially with all this plant-based craze that's out there, are plant-based sources of magnesium. Now, this on the surface would sound great. You go, well, look at this. It's coming from a plant, and it says it's got a super high mg count in it as well. I'm like, oh, how can I lose? Well, unfortunately, much like with the synthetic variants, it's a little bit different, but you have to think about it in terms of like an operating system. And the best way that I've heard this described is actually from Dr. Paul Saladino, and he talks about like the human body, let's just call that like an iPhone. I like Apple products and so does he. And then let's talk about like the plant operating system as like Android, for example. So when you take something that's derived from a plant, even in its whole form, and you try to input it into the human operating system, or if we imagine them like an iPhone, try to install an Android app on an iPhone, it doesn't work. Now, there are some little crossover benefits and some things we can realize as a benefit from plants. Don't get me wrong there. All of what we do is herbal medicine. We're using plants. Plants are medicine. However, when it comes to some sorts of specific minerals, this is a really weedy topic to get into because there's a lot of anti-nutrients which can impact mineral absorption that isn't really well mapped out right now. So the bioavailability of most plant-based minerals and vitamins, it's not great. It's almost the same as a supplement that's been synthesized. Maybe a little bit better because it's coming from a natural source, but all indications state from the data and the research studies that we've used to put this video together, it isn't great. It's poorly absorbed, and the other problem as well is, you have the exact same digestive issues. And again, where we're leading into about this next part of this discussion is that how everything coexists together, how all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and all the different constituents that go into forming an actual food work together synergistically. And this is something that's lost on most modern nutritionists and most food companies today as well. So supplements, not great. Plant-based, a little better, still not awesome. So where do you go from there? Well, really it's an animal-based diet is where you need to be eating. So if you're suffering from kidney stones, specifically, and it just goes to all of them, but really truly with calcium oxalate kidney stones, you should be switching to an animal-based diet. That's where I stopped all of my kidney stones. As soon as I started eating carnivore or animal-based, as I have been the last couple of years, no more kidney stones. It was amazing. And the reason for this is there's manyfold, basically. But in the context of what we're talking about today with magnesium, animal-based foods are very high in magnesium, and they are in the right proportion to all the rest of the vitamins and minerals that you should be consuming on a day-to-day basis to be a healthy human. And when you fold all those things together, they all act synergistically, again, to not only make you healthier, but also to prevent kidney stones from forming in the first place. Very surface level, there's no vegetation in here. There's fruits, but fruits are ripe, and plants want you to eat them, unlike their roots and their stems and the leaves, which they don't want you to eat because that's their body. That's the way that they operate. So it's absent of any oxalates. And then the other piece of it, it's very high in citrates. It's very high in things like magnesium, which are protective. So all these things are good. So the different things that you should be looking for. Fish is probably the strongest source. So salmon, mackerel, halibut, things like that. You have to be a little bit careful about where the fish are coming from and the heavy metal contents that you might run into. So there are other things that you should be looking at. Fruits are also really good, like bananas and also avocados. And yes, avocados are a fruit. I don't particularly care for them. They're disgusting to me. But some people love them, so don't fear avocados. Those are just fine. They're also a source of great fat too. Dairy products like yogurt and milk. This has been, I guess, what I'll call bastardized a lot, especially with big food companies. So if you can find a local dairy that's either doing their own type of kefir or raw milk type of products, that's best because it hasn't been adulterated and all the nutrients are still present. But I understand that there are going to be parts of the country where you can't get this. But choose the best, least processed product that you can find on the marketplace. And then lastly, beef organs. So liver, heart, and kidney, these are astonishing sources of magnesium and a whole host of other vitamins and minerals. Now, you can get these from a supplement company like a Heart and Soil or Ancestral Supplements or any of those brands online or whatever you decide to partner with. We have no affiliation with any of those guys. We just like their products. Or you can actually eat the organs themselves. So I have a farm that I get most of my food from, and I get heart, liver, and kidney, and it's outstanding. Grass-fed, grass-finished, it's organic. It tastes amazing. A lot of people have an aversion to liver because they really haven't probably tasted good liver. But once they taste a good liver or good heart, kidney's a little hit or miss for me, but liver and heart are very sweet. And they're really tasty to eat just raw. You don't need that much either. But if you can't stomach that to begin with, supplement, little capsules will work great as well. Now the other piece of the puzzle here I want to call out, because as I'd mentioned in the introduction to this, is that the misinformation that you see online and the bad information that you get from your doctor leading you away from where you really should be, which is this type of eating style, it's intentional. There's an entire system that is at work between big corporations, the government, the pharmaceutical companies. It's all one big interlinked conspiracy. And I say conspiracy, but it's actual truth. These things are actually happening. And as part of that, the databases that you are probably going to use to be able to construct your balanced diet, quote unquote, to ensure that you might get that RDA of 350 to 400 milligrams of magnesium. If you're using an app like a MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or things along those lines, just know that the data is not going to be fully represented there. There are so many different things, especially with meat in particular, and meat products. They don't measure that because they don't feel it's significant. They don't feel it's significant. But really, they're just hiding information from the public is what they're doing. They're not giving you the whole picture. They're only giving you parts of the puzzle. So just know that if you're using one of those apps, probably going to come up short, but if you're eating in this style, rest assured that you're getting all the nutrients, all the vitamins, all the amino acids, all the things that you need to be healthy on a day-to-day basis. And I know this, and there are millions of other people that are starting to be awoken to this as well. And you can get this tested by a blood test very simply on an annual basis, like I do, to make sure that all your levels are where they should be. But just know that this eating style, above all else, will help you solve this root issue and also provide you with all the magnesium that you need to be able to play a protective role against your calcium oxalate kidney stones. If you'd like to join a community of people learning the secrets behind putting an end to their kidney stones, visit our website.